I have a story to tell. Hello everyone, my name is Ellen. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to tell you the story of the coolest volunteering project in the whole world, or if you're Norwegian, and that is the story of the launch of the biggest Viking ship ever to be found in Norway, the launch of the replica Myklebust Ship 2024 last year in April. And because we're going to do it again this year in April 2025, I really wanted to tell you the story about how it was done for the very first time in 2024 last year. It was an amazing week. We were over 100 volunteers to make this project happen. And this story will be a little bit my perspective, like the perspective of someone who actually didn't really know what was happening or what the hell I was doing, but still I felt that I contributed a tiny little bit. So here is that story, and I hope you enjoy. So if you don't know the story of Myklebust Ship, it is the biggest Viking ship ever to be found in Norway, in Nordfjordeid. I will post a link here down below to the website, because there you can find the whole history, all the information as well for the launch this year. So it's super interesting, just check it out. But very short, the Myklebust Ship was the biggest Viking ship ever to be found in Norway. It was found in Nordfjordeid, and it was burnt. So the only thing they found were ashes and of course a bunch of other stuff. And with all of this stuff and the weight of the ashes, etc., they could replicate, or they could guess how big the ship was, right? How many persons it would seat when it was rowed. Using this information, they made a complete replica using the old historical techniques. Amazing boat builders, not so far from Nordfjordeid, did an amazing job building an amazing replica. I will also post that down below, because if I found it back, there is an amazing video about how the ship was actually made back in, I think it was 2018, 2019. Maybe I'm wrong. I will post it down below here. And the goal always have been to have this ship available to be put into the ocean and to be sailed. Now, most of its time, the ship is in its museum, and the museum was built around the ship, and it is visited by so many people every single year. Mostly cruise tourists coming to the fjords, visiting the museum. So it is actually pretty important that the ship is visible and standing in the museum all the time. That's why it's not out at sea permanently, right? But it is supposed to be launched from last year into the future, will be launched every single year, at least as I understand what is the goal. And getting the ship in and out of museum is not that easy. The story really begins not in April, but a couple of months before that, because of course there were several meetings, and it really just starts with an idea, right? And an idea of the people running this museum, amazing people running this museum. They started to figure out how can we make this possible, right? This is what I think is so wonderful. They had the vision of getting the local community involved, people from Nordfjordeid, people living in Nordfjord. I think this makes this project so extremely special because of the local contribution and the local volunteering work that goes into this community project almost, which gives it the most amazing atmosphere, the most amazing community built around this whole project. So it really just started with a bunch of meetings. There was a bunch of brainstorming, people trying to figure out how can we help with this, what is done professionally, what can be done by volunteering, or a mix of both, right? Because most people volunteering do have some maritime experience, or have experience with boats and whatnot. Everyone and their uncle has a boat. We are at the west coast of Norway after all. And so we did have a couple of these meetings trying to figure out which kind of groups we needed for the volunteering project. And it was decided we were having, I think we ended up having 3 groups. We had the people sewing clothes, because of course everyone needed to be looking historically kind of correct when they would be sailing the ship. And then we had the people rowing. There's a lot, I think there was the biggest group, all the volunteers volunteering to row a shift. And then lastly we also had the group that would actually be helping to put the ship from the museum into the sea and back into the museum. My husband and I, we were volunteering for the two last groups, so we were both in the rowing group and we were also in the sea putting group, which gave us actually a pretty nice overview of the whole project. And one very important aspect of it, especially for all the people in the rowing group, was that we had to be trained in rowing. So we used little wooden rowing boats. I think we all had the option to participate in some of these trainings, which was already a special experience, because I remember thinking when I was scheduled for my row training, it was in miserable weather. It was freezing cold, it was raining, there was a lot of wind. And I was thinking, maybe they're going to cancel it, or maybe we're going to row a different day, because today is it's such a bad weather day, right? But nobody really thought about that, and we just went on with training. It was a good experience, learning to row in the element. Hard school Norwegian, all right? They made us do different exercises, right? Going away from the bridge, rowing, turning the other direction. And then we had to row a little bit out in the waves and the wind, and then try to make our way back into the marina and put ourselves back onto the bridge. Which I think this whole training must have been quite amusing to watch as well. From Nordfjordeid, because the whole village of Nordfjordeid is laying around the fjord. So if you put a little rowing water, just doing stupid shits onto the fjord, in and out, I think it must have been pretty funny for onlookers. And then the story of the sea launch itself really begins on, it was a Tuesday evening that we met in the museum with a group that would actually put out the ship and put it back in again. We were meeting already on the Tuesday evening because the ship will be put out to sea on the high tides on a Wednesday around lunchtime. Everyone was kind of we need enough time, right? Because nobody really had done this before. I remember it was a lot of carrying a bunch of stuff. If you would go into the ship, the floor was made out of several parts, and every single part was made to scale, especially in a single place in every ship. So all of these parts of the floor had to come out, had to be carried down because they had to be transported to the marina, right? Then we also needed the oars. A bunch of safety equipment had to go on board of the ship. And then, very importantly, they had to fetch a pump, because, I will explain this later, a lot of water was to be expected to run into the ship. So it was very important to have a good pump on board, so that the water could be pumped out from the instant, that the ship would hit the waves. It's pretty permanent the way the ship is standing in the museum, right? So there is a staircase attached to it, so people can actually walk up to the ship and walk into the ship from there. So this steel staircase had to be detached from the ship, put away, the little steel bridge had to be put away from the ship. And then if you would go and walk around the ship is actually supported in the museum by these steel, little steel columns to hold it in place. But these steel columns obviously had to go, and so they also had to make these wooden parts put in the carriage, so the ship would actually be stable or standing stable onto its wheels without the use of these steel columns. So all of this work took actually quite a long time, right? There's a lot of people running around, and also a lot of people looking onto everything, because it's very interesting that everyone is learning how it goes, especially if we are planning to do it every single year. We also had to test out the winch, so it's a steel cable attached to the carriage with the wheels. We had to test it if it would actually let the ship in and out, because we would be using this winch to get the ship, let the ship go, rolling out, and also pull the ship back in the museum afterwards. So the winch had to be tested out, and then they also had to test out the opening of the doors. The doors had not been open in a very long time, so they had to test out the doors. I remember there was even something that needed to be removed onto the concrete bridge, the ramp going into the water from the museum. So they had to do a bunch of stuff to make sure that everything would go pretty smoothly on Wednesday when the ship would actually be launched. So I just got home. It's 9:30 in the evening. We met at 5 o'clock, and then we worked until almost 9 o'clock to get everything prepared for putting it out in the sea tomorrow morning. So we're meeting again tomorrow at 7:30. So it's there's a lot to do and time goes really fast. I'm very tired. I will be very tired again tomorrow, but this is so exciting. And so we met again on Wednesday morning, quite early actually. I think everyone was very, very eager to start doing the work on Wednesday because we were having this time limit with the high tide, and it was pretty important that the ship would hit the water at high tide. So everyone was like pretty excited to get going. We met quite early on Wednesday morning. First thing we actually did, we got divided into some little groups because some little jobs needed to be done. We went out to the marina where the ship would actually be laying into the water for the coming few days. And we needed these big car tires or tractor tires to be tied together and to put onto the concrete corners where it was like a potential that the wind would blow the wooden ship onto like the concrete edges. We like put some tires there. So this was one of those little jobs needed to be done. And then we met back at the museum. Doors got opened, and then the first thing that was done, that was on top of the doors there's also a window, and this window had to be open because the head of the ship was needed to fit perfectly in between this window. And then we could start like with the winch, we would actually can start like pushing the ship out in between the doors, in between this little window. And the job I got like a walkie-talkie, and I just had to, we were several people doing this, right? And we just had to walk all around the ship. Everyone got a spot all around the ship, and we basically had to watch the edges if there was no danger of the ship actually bumping into something, and then we just had to like yell, like stop at the walkie-talkie. So like he would like stop rolling out because damn, like it is very narrow. Like this museum was built around the ship in a very narrow way. So the gate is narrow, the window is narrow, but also all the other elements that are permanently in the museum that are standing like fixed around the ship left like centimeters for the ship to be able to pull out, right? Because the largest part of the ship, the middle part, is actually quite is quite substantial, right? And he had to like go, like this wide part had to move through the museum towards the gate. So we really had to be careful to watch that. It was just fitting. Like I remember at the closest point, I think it was really like this, right? It was like a centimeter. Just a centimeter, so the ship would be able to pass by. And so it took quite a long time. You would think like, oh, it just rolled out, right? Like it can be done in 15 minutes. But no, it really took a long time because the ship had to be like, it was out a little bit and then in a little bit again, right? Because it had the danger of bumping into something. And then, okay, let's go a little bit more to the left, like a little bit out again. Oh no, okay, a little bit in again. Now we go a little bit to the right. And so it was basically in and out and in and out and a little bit steering to the right and a little bit steering to the left. And then even when the ship was on the concrete ramp going in, it was still pretty narrow. If you would look to the wagon with the wheel supporting the ship and then the edge of the concrete ramp going down, it was like, I felt it was like 10 centimeters. If the ship was going down straight in the middle, there was only like 10 centimeters in between the rocks going downwards. So we really had to, again, in and out, a little bit more this side, a little bit more that side. So we really had to watch all the way the ship coming down. And then I think everyone's favorite moment was exactly when the ship started floating, right? So the wagon went down and down and down and down and more down and more down. And then you had all of a sudden the second where the ship got floated off or was like raised enough by the water to float from the wagon. So it went down and down and down. And then like suddenly there came this second where the ship went out onto the waves. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing to watch. I think everyone's heart stopped a little bit as soon as the ship went out because it was so nice to see the ship actually laying onto the water. And then these little RIB boats were already into the water to catch the ship, right? So they caught the ship and then they went to one on either side of it and then they like helped to push it to go into the marina, where it would be laying for the next coming days. As you can see on the images, it was full of water. As soon as the ship hit the water, it became all of a sudden filled with water. That's why it was so important to have these pumps on board to pump the water out continuously. Now, the reason there was so much water in the boat, and also the reason we had to wait a couple of days in between putting the ship out and actually be able to row it onto the ocean, was because the wood, by having the ship into the museum, into the warm and to the dry, right? The wood became very dry and it shrinked a little bit. So the water could become could come in between the wooden planks and fill the boat. Now, having the boat into the water meant that the wood would actually expand again, so the edges in between the planks would close and the ship would become watertight again. The whole of Thursday and Friday, the ship was just lying out in the water, soaking. It's around 12 o'clock now. We just put the Viking boat out in the small boat marina. If I translate literally from Norwegian, it's a small boat marina. It was super exciting, especially the moment that it actually started flowing on its own, and suddenly it was gone on the water, right? Because of course the wood has been dry for 4 years. Of course, a lot of water came into the boat. They put some pumps in there, and the pumps will now be keeping the boat afloat for the next coming days. I also got some clothing home because there is a sewing group attached to the whole organization, and this sewing group made some amazing, so beautiful clothing, which we are going to use when we're going to actually row the boat in the weekend. So I got with me some clothes, and I'm definitely going to try them out, because of course I have to hand them back again when I'm done rowing my shift, if that's a good way to say it. I am also really tired because today was so cold. It was actually snowing at some point again, so I'm pretty cold, so I definitely need to eat something warm and maybe take a hot shower now. But it was all worth it. I'm just going to try on the outfit that they gave me. So I don't have to stress on Saturday morning, because we are going to row very early in the morning. So we have to get up quite early, and I want to make sure I have everything we need to take with us. And they also asked us to put some effort into how we're going to present ourselves. So I'm actually going to try to braid my hair and actually try it out now, so I know if and what I am going to do if I have to get up at 7:30 Saturday morning, right? So I do have very long hair. Okay, I just divided my hair into 5 sections, and I want to see if I can make 2 Dutch braids with these parts here. Let's see if I can manage this, because if I'm not able to do this, then I'm probably just going to do one big Dutch braid, Alright, so I managed one. It's far from perfect, but you know what, it's good enough. Alright, and then now I'm going to try to join them all together here. I don't know if I like it. I think I will send a picture and send it to my sister. And ask what she thinks. But actually, to be fair, this took me 15 minutes. And if this is pretty good, then I will just do it a little bit better on Saturday morning, as in I will divide. I think I want the middle part to be a bit larger, so I want to have the side parts a bit shorter together, if that makes sense. Make them a bit smaller, make my lines a bit more tidy, and then put a little bit more, force into these, put them a bit tighter, and then make this a bit fluffier, I don't know. So I think if I put in 10 extra minutes on Saturday, this could be something that looks quite alright. Now the super exciting part, let's grab the costume they gave me. I will show you what I have, and then I'm going to put it on. Alright, so what I have is, they gave me this linen underdress, and this one is actually from, maybe you can see, this one is from Kleesarven. So let's just see what the fit is on this, but in any case, you use a belt, right? So it doesn't really matter, if it's a little bit too big. It is quite long though. I'm not a very long person. You can't see it, but it actually is almost to the floor. So let's see how that works out for me. In the worst case, I make it a bit shorter with an extra belt I can use underneath, the overdress. Alright, and then I have an overdress. It's a red, it's full wool, so it's 100% wool. And this is, it's also, because they didn't really have smaller sizes, so it is a size large, but again, I just use a belt, right? And it is from this German brand. Let's see if you can read it. I don't know how to pronounce German, but it's called Burgsneider, maybe. So let's see how the fit is on that one. They had a lot of hand-sewn clothes, but mainly clothes for men, and they only had very few of these traditional women's clothing. And I'm actually I feel very lucky. I got home one of these. I feel it's really, really pretty. But also the clothes that they sew themselves, I will put some images in the video, of course. They are so, so beautiful. And then the last thing that I own, this is like a wool hood, so it's 100% wool hood, and I got it at the Midgardsblot festival 2 years ago, of like a lady who made it herself. It's a very nice, warm, a very warm, natural red color, and it has the Helm of Oil symbol on it. This can be controversial because it's not really sure if this symbol was actually used on clothes 1,000 years ago. Anyhow, I still am going to use it. Alright, let's put everything on. Then we were finally Saturday, and Saturday would be the rowing day, right? That was the most exciting day, and we were so lucky with the weather. I woke up in the morning, it was a clear blue sky, sunshine. We were absolutely blessed by the weather gods. There was going to happen so much filming and photography, right? So we got so lucky with the weather. Then early in the morning we got to the meeting place where they collected all of the clothes, because the people from the volunteering group did the clothing, the sewing of the clothing, and they had done such an amazing job. I cannot stress this enough. Amazing work that these ladies did. So they had collected all of their handmade clothes onto the meeting place, because everyone who was going to row out in the ship had to be dressed up. It needed to be a little bit historically accurate. We couldn't go with modern clothing onto this beautiful ship. And then we were divided into 3 shifts. So there were going to be 3 shifts. My husband and I were put onto the first one. It was amazing to be the first ones to actually sail the ship. We were so honored. It wasn't very a long time. I felt that we basically rowed. We went out to the marina. We sailed a little bit into the fjord. They were lying still a little bit, so it was possible for people to make some pictures and videos. It was pretty important for everyone involved, and most of all the people from the museum, right, from Sagasta. It was so important for them to have so much material they could use to promote the museum. So we got a lot of time to lying still in the water, row a little bit more, lying a little bit still, rowing a little bit more, again a little bit of a break, and then we rowed back into the marina. If you just look at the social media videos and their own video that Sagasta made, it looks like everything went super fast and smooth, and everything was super quick in and out. But actually things took quite a lot of time. Every single aspect of the whole launch went slowly. Right, so it was not really a quick in and out thing. We got so much time to enjoy it, which was super important. It was an amazing atmosphere on board. It felt so surreal to be actually sitting on this ship, completely dressed up. It was an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful I got to have this experience, to be part of the first launching of this ship, and to be volunteering for this amazing project, and to be rewarded in such an amazing way. It was really, really wonderful. We came back into the marina, and then for the second shift, they invited this famous Viking people who got a really big following on social media, so they could. Obviously, it's smart, right? Invite the famous people, so they have a big following, and then because they have a big following, they will promote this amazing happening. Otherwise, even though it's the coolest thing in the whole world, if nobody knows about it, right? What do you want to do with it, right? So it was pretty smart. So they were invited onto the ship. It was a little bit of a show. They used the horses, and they were dressed really beautifully dressed, and probably they made all of their own clothes, so I have a huge respect for that. Absolutely wonderful job they were doing with it. And then I think there was even a couple, and they got married onto the ship. They got married there. Which was quite special to watch, because they practiced the marrying in the marina before they went out to the ocean, so everyone would be able to witness it. And then they sailed out, and then they had their wedding onto the ocean. And I think the second shift is also where most of these social media images are coming from. If you have been seeing like these hugely popular videos of the sea launch of April in 2024, it was filmed onto the second rowing shift. And I think it was like from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was in the middle of the day. I have to say it was pretty amazing to watch it from ashore. I remember we were going out to the outer edge of the marina. We were able to watch it in this amazing weather, like seeing the ship rowing onto the fjords, and you could almost like imagine you were transported 1,000 years back in time and how things could have been going in that time in history. So it was as amazing to watch it as it was amazing to row it. So all in all, it was an amazing day. The ship got in again. And then it was also a third shift when they went out. And I think when the third shift went out, they also used some small Viking ships, like a little Viking rowing boats. I think what I found very disproportionate this whole day was, like, this was the coolest event ever, right? Like, it was surreal, like, seeing the ship out, like, putting it in and out of the museum, like, rowing it with all these amazing people who were invited. The weather, like, the location, the mountains, it just blew my mind how amazing this was. And still there was not so many onwatchers. Like, apart from all the volunteering groups, there was a few people who obviously lived in the village of Nordfjordeid who came to watch. But other than that, it was so quiet. Like, I can imagine if the same event would happen in a big city, that they, even though they wouldn't have like announced the event, they would have to like inform the police, and like they had to inform the city. And I can't imagine it would go on in the same way in a bigger city, because you know what, there was almost no security. It was just like a bunch of people already living there and volunteering. So it felt very disproportionate, like the bigness of the event and then how little public there was. And this also gives it such a special memory, just because not many people were there, and it was like, it felt almost like a community project, like an absolute honor to be part of it. And then the last part, we met again on Sunday morning. It should need to be put back into the museum. So first we had to we do everything in reverse, right? So all of the floor plates, all of the oars had to be carried back into the museum, and then they floated the ship in front of the concrete ramp again. And the most difficult part here was to get it back onto the wagon. So they rolled the wagon with the wheels back out into the water, and then they had to try to get the ship onto the wagon in a correct way. So this took quite a long time. It was quite difficult. It was very, very interesting to watch it as well. And then they started pulling the ship back in. So they used the winch again, and they actually they pulled it. So they didn't just use the winch; they actually pulled the ship back in onto the concrete in front of the museum. And once it was there, they obviously had to do a bunch of stuff. They had to adjust again that the ship was standing really good onto the wagon. They had to adjust it quite a little bit. And then the fire department was there to rinse and wash the whole ship, because otherwise it would just carry a bunch of salt into the museum. So it had to be washed with fresh water. And then once it was washed, it was pulled back into the museum, which was as difficult as getting it out, right? Because it had to fit into this narrow window above of the gate. So it had to try to get it back in, and it was exactly the same way as when we put it out. It was in and out, and in and out, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, in and out, in and out, in and out. So it took quite a long time. It took more time to get the ship in than to get the ship out, because the ship had to be perfectly on the same spot again into the museum. The museum, the construction is pretty narrowly, or everything that's attached to it is pretty narrowly built around the ship, so it had to be completely perfectly back onto its spot, because this steel staircase had to be put back in place so people could actually go into the ship again. These steel columns had to be put back. So it was a lot of adjustments. It was a lot of adjustments getting the ship absolutely back into the museum. It was used a lot of time for this. Again, with pretty little on viewers. I think most of the people who went and watched it got bored after 2 hours, and it took a lot longer than 2 hours, right? I think we used almost the whole day. We met in the morning, and then we were even there late in the afternoon. And then once we were done, the people from the museum obviously had a lot more work, right? The ship had to dry and then they had to clean everything again. They had to close the doors and then make the ship ready for visitors again. Because don't forget that here in the fjords in Norway and in Nordfjordeid, we get visited by quite a lot of cruise tourists. And these cruise tourists are the providers of the main source of income for these touristic places like Sagastad Museum. It was pretty important that people would be able to visit the museum again in a normal and comfortable way. So even after we were done by putting the ship back onto its spot, then the people from the museum itself, I think, probably had a lot of work left to clean up the whole mess. And then, of course, they had so much like footage, right? Videos and images, and like, there were so many cameras there, right? I think they have been like editing and making content ever since, and they have done an amazing job in growth. They have grown from a very small museum with a small following to the biggest touristic attraction in all of Norway. Like, can you imagine the job they have done? I have so much respect for that. This is amazing, like the work they have put into this. And so now the whole world knows about Nordfjordeid, the whole world knows about Myklebust Ship, the whole world knows about Sagastad. It's an honor to be part of it, really. And I look forward to the launch in April. Then we can do the whole adventure over again. This was a very long video, but I think the story is exciting enough for me to not press this video and like try to make it very short. I think this video deserves to be very long because the amazing work that Sagastad Museum has done here, I have so much respect for it. So thank you so much for watching my video. Thank you so much for listening to my perspective and my story. And maybe you want to follow along in April this year. Bye bye.